years old, I found this book lying on the side of the road. Filled with stories of the bizarre and supernatural, it would forever change the way I looked at the world. This is one of those stories.
Hey guys, it's pajama time. Let's read a ghost story. Right, tonight we're going to be reading... let's go... we did a haunted house one yesterday. Oh, I like this one. Dogs with Human Brains. This one's quite cool. Dogs with Human Brains. From the book Strange Unsolved Mysteries by Margaret Ronan, 1974. Some of the language is a little bit old-fashioned, so just bear with it. It's all about the story. Dumb animals, we say. Do we mean by dumb that animals can't talk? Or do we mean that they're stupid? Used in either sense, the word dumb cannot apply to the dogs in this chapter. All showed almost human intelligence, and all could communicate their thoughts and opinions to humans. Jim was an English setter, the pet of a hotel owner, Sam Van Arsdale. For the first 4 years of Jim's life, he seemed to be just an ordinary dog. Then one day in 1929, he seemed to take several giant leaps up the IQ scale. On that particular day, Van Arsdale was strolling around the hotel grounds with Jim. A variety of trees grew there, and one of them caught Van Arsdale's attention. "That elm over there looks like it's got some kind of blight," he said to himself. "I wonder if any of the other elms have caught it." To Van Arsdale's amazement, Jim broke away from his side. The dog scampered across the lawn to another elm and came to a halt at the foot of the tree, whining and barking. When Van Arsdale examined the tree, he discovered it too had the beginnings of a blight disease also. But how had Jim known that Van Arsdale was talking about, and how had he known which tree to find? Was it just coincidence? Wondered Van Arsdale. Or could it be that Jim actually knew one tree from another? Aloud he murmured, "Find a birch tree, Jim." Obediently, Jim ran off, coming to a halt in front of a birch. Astonished, Van Arsdale forgot about coincidence and began to test the dog. Could Jim pick out a locust tree, an oak, a beech? The dog could and did. Further experiments showed he could also tell one make of car from another. Jim, it soon developed, had another talent, one which made him famous and made other people money. Van Arsdale discovered that Jim could pick the winners of horse races. He would read the names of horses scheduled to run in an upcoming race, and Jim would bark when the name of the winner was read out. When the race was run, the horse that Jim had chosen never failed to come in first. Jim could also pick winners if Van Arsdale wrote the names of the horses on slips of paper. When the slips were laid on the floor in front of the dog, he would look them over, then place his paw on his choice. Crowds came to see Jim do this trick, then many of them would rush off to place their bets. Van Arsdale, however, never bet on Jim's tips. He didn't believe in gambling. As might be expected, Jim became a celebrity. A movie company offered to star him, but Van Arsdale said no. Thinking Van Arsdale must have some secret set of signals that he passed along to Jim, Professors Durant and Dickinson of the University of Missouri asked if they might test him without Van Arsdale. Jim was taken to the university to perform before an audience of 900 spectators. Although Jim had never heard anything but English spoken, he had no trouble carrying out orders given to him in German, Spanish, and Italian. Jim's ability to understand foreign languages, however, was only part of the show. Next, the professors ordered him to go down into the audience. "Look around and find a man with a black moustache," they told the dog. Without hesitating, Jim located such a man and placed his paw on the gentleman's knee. "Find a lady in a blue dress." Jim did so after a few minutes of searching. "Now find a little girl wearing white stockings." This took a little longer, but Jim finally turned up a child answering that description. The professors were impressed with Jim's abilities, and so was the Missouri State Legislature. They suspended government business for a day so that Jim could perform for them. The legislators rigged up a test they felt sure Jim wouldn't be able to pass. They hired a telegrapher. They hired a telegrapher to tap out instructions to the dog in Morse code. Surely Jim would be confused by dots and dashes, but the code was no riddle to Jim. When the telegrapher, that's what I'm going with, tapped out instructions to find a certain senator, Jim made a beeline for the right man. The legislature gave the dog a standing ovation. As the years went by, Jim became feeble and seemed less interested in performing for curious humans. But in 1936, an election of national importance was to be held. To settle arguments among his friends, Van Arsdale asked Jim to predict the winner, the man who would be elected President of the United States. The Reader's Digest had predicted that Alfred Landon, the Republican candidate, would occupy the White House. Jim disagreed. His choice was Franklin D. Roosevelt, by a landslide. But this was his last prediction, and like all others he made, it was right on target. Was Jim psychic? Did he read the minds of those humans who plagued him with questions? If so, this would account for his uncanny ability to understand any language and code. There seems to be no other explanation. There is even less explanation for the case of the speaking dog. Two men in Pittsburgh swore they met such a dog on July 29, 1908. The men were out for a walk on Lincoln Avenue. An ordinary black dog trotted up to them, wagging its tail. "Good morning," said the dog. Aghast, the men looked at each other. Was one of them a ventriloquist playing a joke? "Not at all," said the dog. "I speak for myself." With that, the dog went on its way. Stunned and speechless, the men watched. Then one of them suddenly became angry. "It's a trick!" he shouted. "Let's grab that animal and find out how it's done." Leaving his friend, he ran after the dog. What happened next was reported to the policeman on the beat by his friend. The man who had chased the dog was too hysterical to make any sense. He chased the dog officer and caught up with it. He was going to grab it when the creature said, "Don't touch me," but he did anyway. Caught hold of one of its hind legs. Then he let out a terrible scream. The dog got away. "But look at my poor friend's hand." He pried open the clenched fingers of the hysterical man's hand. A livid mark, patterned with an etching of dog hairs, was burned into the palm. The last word in stories about weird and wonderful dogs belongs to Chris, owned by George Wood of Rhode Island. Just for fun, in 1953, Mr. Wood decided to teach Chris to count by saying numbers out loud, then tapping the dog's paw on the chair a corresponding number of times. Chris proved to be an astoundingly quick pupil. In almost no time at all, he learned to count up to 1,000,000, and then went on to learn addition, subtraction, and cube root problems. He also learned to spell by putting his paw on cards marked with letters of the alphabet. Like Jim's, Chris's fame soon spread, and like Jim, he became the subject of a number of scientific tests. Research specialists from universities in Rhode Island, South Carolina, and Delaware put him through his paces. For one test, the scientists thought up a problem so complicated that they believed only a computer could solve it. Chris came up with the correct answer in 4 minutes. How did he do it? The specialists asked each other. "Smart dog," Chris spelled out with his alphabet cards. brain power. And that is dogs with human brains. And I will see you next time.